We're going to start Basi Legani. We're less than a month away from... Good morning.
Yeah.
We're less than a month away from Yud Shvat.
What time did you, after midnight, you ask the question?
So, we're less than a month away from Yud Shvat. Yud Shvat is the anniversary of the passing of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, in 1950. And it's the day that the Rebbe assumed leadership of Lubavitch in 1950, but officially assuming the official position when he said his first Maimer, which was on Yud Shvat in 1951. So just a little background on the Mamarim, and then we'll get into today's Maimer. So the Rebbe writes that in 1950 it was Friday. It was Tes Shvat. The 9th of Shvat was Friday in 1950, and the Frierdiker Rebbe had prepared in advance, ahead of time, had prepared a new hemshech, a series of mamarim that, bless you, that he wanted to be learned throughout the next several months. And the Rebbe, who was involved in printing and publishing and preparing the mamarim, is director of Kahas. The Rebbe added footnotes to the mamarim. So on Friday, the first installment had come back from the printer. And back up a second. So the series, which begins with the Maimer Basi Legani, is really actually a mamarim that the Frierdiker Rebbe had said in 1923. Vayhi be'etzem ha'yom hazeh and Matitzak Elai, two mamarim. Most of the Basi Legani is basically those mamarim that the Frierdiker Rebbe had actually said earlier in 1923. The way it would work often is by the Rabbeim, is that they would say a Maimer, and say it orally, and then they would write it, transcribe the Maimer, and prepare it for publication, for study. Sometimes the Maimer is basically a topic that they discuss, and then they add, usually afterwards, either they added when they said the Maimer, they would have a beginning and an end, an opening paragraph and a closing paragraph. Opening paragraph would be a quote, generally from scripture, from the Pasuk, or sometimes from Chazal, Maimer Chazal, and they would ask usually some questions on it, then get into the topic they want to discuss, and in the end there'd be a closing topic, usually, not even always, but generally there was a closing paragraph that based on the explanation that we gave and on whatever topic the Maimer was exploring, we can explain the questions that we had on the Pasuk in the beginning. So there would be an opening and closing paragraph. The opening and closing paragraph, like sort of the lock or the key to the Maimer, was really just an opening and a closing. It wasn't really part of the main subject. So sometimes they would say a Maimer, and then they would write the Maimer and not have a beginning and end. Sometimes they would add the beginning, sometimes add the end. So this series that the Frierdiker Rebbe was preparing for 1950, for the winter of 1950, was from an earlier Mamarim that he had said. And here he was preparing with a different opening and different closing. So he had prepared this topic. This series was broken into 4 Mamarim. So he had prepared the first 2 Mamarims to be studied on Yud Shvat and on Yud Gimel Shvat. Yud Shvat is the anniversary of his grandmother's passing, Rebbetzin Rivka, the wife of the Rebbe Maharash. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was actually a very close relationship with her. They were very close. He was very fond of her. And so her yard site is Yud Shvat. So his grandmother. And so the Frierdiker Rebbe prepared the first Maimer of this series with an opening title, an opening and a closing. It opens with an opening paragraph, Basi Legani, and ends with a closing. And also he added summaries between the chapters. And then also he prepared a Maimer for 3 days later for Yud Gimel Shvat. Yud Gimel Shvat is the anniversary of his mother's passing. Rebbe Steiner Sarah passed away just 8 years earlier in 1942 in New York. So that was her yard site is Yud Gimel Shvat. So he prepared a Maimer with the title Basi Legani for Yud Shvat, to be studied Yud Shvat, and then a Maimer Hayesheves Beganim, which is the second installment in that series for Yud Gimel Shvat. And because he had prepared it for publication to study, he had added an opening paragraph, a closing paragraph, and summaries to both these Mamarim. But each one of those 2 Mamarim were 5 chapters. So the 5 chapters in the first Maimer Basi Legani, 5 chapters in the one Hayesheves Beganim. And then there were 2 more Mamarim that the Frierdiker Rebbe had prepared to be published later, that are part of that series, that the next installment would be for Purim. And the installment after that would be for Beis Nissen. Beis Nissen is the anniversary of his father's passing, the yard site of the Rebbe Rashab. So like this, there was one series, 4 Mamarim. Each Maimer was 5 chapters. The first two Mamarim he had prepared with a beginning, an opening and a closing for Yud Shvat and Yud Gimel Shvat, and the other two still maybe he was planning on doing it. But the point is, it was just 10 more chapters, the second half of the series, which doesn't have summaries and doesn't have an opening and closing. Why? Because the Frierdiker Rebbe had asked to have this prepared. The Rebbe prepared it. He says that on Friday afternoon he brought the new Kuntras Ayin Daled. There's a new booklet with the two Mamarim, the first two of the series. Basi Legani and Yeshevas Beganim, he brought that booklet into the Frierdiker Rebbe, to the Frierdiker Rebbe's room, and the Rebbe emphasizes the room where he met people for Yechidus, where he studied, Dav in that room, and the Frierdiker Rebbe was saying it was Friday afternoon, and he had a siddur. The Rebbe even cites which edition, Torah Or Tafshin Aleph. It was printed in New York in Tafshin Aleph, 1941. It was open to page Mem Hey, page 45. It was the end of Hoidu and the beginning of Pasach Aliyah. The siddur was open for the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe put the booklet on the table, and the Frierdiker Rebbe nodded his head and acknowledging with pleasure for the new booklet. The next morning, at 8 o'clock in the morning, the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away. The Rebbe used the term nostalgic. He was nostalgic. Now, the word histalkos, which means siluk, which means he passed away, as is explained in the Basi Legani at length. Nostalgic doesn't mean passing, it doesn't mean that he leaves, but on the contrary, it implies a greater revelation, which is discussed in some of the Basi Leganis. Anyway, so that's the story with the original series that the Frierdiker Rebbe had prepared in 1950. It's spread over 4 discourses, 4 Mamarim, and each one of the 4 contains 5 chapters, so it's a total of 20 chapters. And it opens with the title Basi Legani. So it's the Hemshech, the series called Basi Legani. It's the series the Rebbe would refer to also as the series of the Histalkos, of the Frierdiker Rebbe's passing. And the Rebbe saw this as a sort of a last will and testament, if you will. The Rebbe said, at one point the Rebbe had said that this series has all the answers to all the questions you have till Mashiach is going to come, gives us all the direction. Interestingly, in that year after the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away, that first year, 1950-51, the Rebbe would send people to the Maimer to find answers, and people turn to the Rebbe immediately for advice. And the Rebbe would say, chapter 5, you can find the answer to your question there. You find the answer in chapter 11 to what you're talking about. The Rebbe also said that this Maimer has clear references also to the fact that the Frierdiker Rebbe was going to pass away. There are a few references in there. And so that the Frierdiker Rebbe basically had prepared everything from beforehand, and it's all, you can see it in the Maimer. That year, Yutas Kislev, so just a couple of weeks before the Rebbe would say his first Maimer as Rebbe, the Rebbe spoke about learning the Maimer Basi Legani, especially in general, in connection to Yud Shvat in particular. And the Rebbe spoke about the fact that learning the Torah of the Rebbe creates a great connection, a bond with the individual. The Rebbe told the story about how the Frierdiker Rebbe, in the last year of his father's life, last year of the Rebbe Rashab's life, in 1920, so the Rebbe Rashab spoke to the Frierdiker Rebbe on several occasions, so it was more than once, about the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe and L'Kutei Torah of Adarta Pnei Zaken. It's a short Maimer from the Alter Rebbe and L'Kutei Torah. Parshas Kedoshim, the Alter Rebbe talks about the why it is that you have to honor a Talmud Chacham, somebody who's, why? Because he has the words of Torah that are ingrained in his mind. So it's not, even if he's not thinking it at that time, he's not reviewing the words of Torah in his mind at that moment, but still they're ingrained, they're there. And so the same idea the Rebbe spoke about that we have when we study the Rebbe's Torah, so the Torah becomes ingrained in our minds, and therefore we need to memorize the Maimer. The Rebbe said if you can't memorize the whole Maimer, part of the Maimer, he said main thing is not so much how the quantity, how much of the Maimer you're memorizing. The main thing is the quality, that whatever it is that you're memorizing should be ingrained. It should be something that becomes part of you. And like that, you have the words of the Rebbe ingrained in your mind, and that creates obviously a deep connection. So the Rebbe said that in connection with this Maimer Basi Legani of the Frierdiker Rebbe, what was unique about the Rebbe, so and then every year, so starting Yud Shvat, the first anniversary of the Frierdiker Rebbe's passing, there was a Farbrengen, there's the whole history we don't have to get into now about people felt that was going to be the moment that the Rebbe was officially, even though the Rebbe became Rebbe immediately, Yud Shvat, the Frierdiker Rebbe passed away, then the Rebbe became Rebbe immediately, people started turning to the Rebbe, but the Rebbe had rejected it at first and sent people away and didn't want, but as the year was going on, the point was it became more and more apparent that was, Yud Shvat was going to be the sort of the coronating Farbrengen, if you will. And at that Farbrengen, people came from all over. There were ads in the paper. The Rebbe wanted them to take out to remove the ads or retract the ads. Anyway, the Farbrengen was packed. It was a full house. And at the Farbrengen, the Rebbe said a mimer. The Rebbe he started saying that the Friedrich Rebbe writes in his mimer that he prepared for his histalkus, for his passing. And then the Rebbe launched into the tune, the tune of the mimer, Basi Legani. He started saying Basi Legani. In that mimer, the Rebbe mentioned all of the Rabbeim, all of his predecessors, starting with the Alter Rebbe, all the way through, obviously, the Friedrich Rebbe, the whole mimer is based on the Friedrich Rebbe's mimer. He mentioned all of them, and he actually mentions them 3 times throughout the mimer. That was unique in that first Basi Legani. And so he quotes them by name. And then the following Farbrengen, the Rebbe said a mimer Hayesheves Beganim, that's the title of the second of the installment. And there the Rebbe mentioned the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid as well. The predecessors to the Chabad Rebbe is the Magid, the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid. And then it was that following week, a few days later, Shabbos. So, and then every year afterwards, the Rebbe would say Maimer Basi Legani. It always started with the same title, Basi Legani, and every year the Rebbe would focus on another chapter of the Maimer. So in the first year, the first Maimer, 1951, the focus of the Maimer was on the first chapter of the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer. The second year, the focus was on the second chapter, and so on and so forth. And every year, the Rebbe would begin with the title Basi Legani, with the words Basi Legani, and he would summarize the Maimer sort of up till that point. Very, very, obviously, very short, but he would sort of give a summary, then focus on the chapter for this year's chapter. And every year, the Rebbe would quote the Rabbeim, quote them by name. He would quote all his predecessors, starting from the Baal Shem Tov all the way through the Friedrich Rebbe, which was unique. That was something the Rebbe did the Rosh Hashanah Maimer, and he did it, but the Basi Legani was a unique thing. Starting in 1975, the Rebbe also started quoting his father in all the Basi Leganis. In Lamed Gimel, the Rebbe, it was 400 years from the passing of the Arizal. The Rebbe would quote the Arizal also by name. And in the last few Mamorim, the Rebbe actually quotes the Rambam. It was after the Rebbe had started the daily study cycle of Rambam, and the Rebbe would quote the Rambam also in the Mamorim. That was the last few years. So, Basi Legani is a very central part of Chabad Chassidus and certainly Der Ashvi. The Basi Leganis talk about all kinds of important, relevant messages for our generation. The Rebbe spoke obviously about the fact that it's called Shmin Chavivin, and we're the 7th generation from the Baal Shem Tov. The idea is to bring from the Alter Rebbe, and the mission is to bring the Shechina Lamata Ba'aretz. So it's a very important series. This year is 2018. And so this year we're in the cycle for the 4th time, and we are holding chapter 8 of the Discourse of the Friedrich Rebbe. So in other words, the Rebbe started the cycle, started in 1951, and 1970 the Rebbe finished covering all 20 chapters of the series. In 1971, the Rebbe started again from the beginning, quoting again, starting again, focusing on the first chapter, and then that went all the way till 1988. That was the last year the Rebbe said Basi Legani, so he went through all the way through chapter 18. And then, so starting in 1991, we start again the 3rd time the cycle study of the Maimer, and then now what year are we in? That was 1991. So in 2001 we started again with from the beginning. For the 4th time we started again. So this year we are now focusing on chapter 8 of the Maimer. So now, chapter 8, for chapter 8 we have a few Maimarim from the Rebbe. There's the Maimer the Rebbe said in 1958, Tafshin Yud Ches, and then there's the Maimarim the Rebbe said in 1978. We've been focusing, the last several months, we've been focusing on Maimarim of 1978, the anniversary of Rosh Chodesh Kislev, but we're going to learn now the Maimer from 1958. In 1958, Yud Shvat was on Friday. The way it would work was, if Yud Shvat was on Friday, the Rebbe would say a Maimer in the earlier years on Friday night after Kabbalah Shabbos. So middle of davening, after L'Chadaydi, after the Kaddish of Mekalis Ma'im Rabbi, you say Kaddish, and then the Rebbe would say the Maimer, a Maimer Basi Legani. That was Friday night, and then Motzei Shabbos would be the big Yud Shvat Farbrengen. Saturday night, it was Motzei Shabbos. People could come from all over, via microphone. And so 1958, the Rebbe said a Maimer Basi Legani Friday night after Kabbalah Shabbos, and then Motzei Shabbos was a big Farbrengen in a hall. In those early years, 770 was just the small shul upstairs. There's not enough room to accommodate the big crowds for the big Farbrengens. And so throughout the year, at the big Farbrengens, where they expected a big crowd, they would go to a hall. So this was done, there was Albany Terrace, further down in Crown Heights, Albany and Rutland. And that's where the Farbrengen was held on Motzei Shabbos. At the Farbrengen, the Rebbe said the Basi Legani again, which was common that when you had Shabbos, the Rebbe would say the same Maimer a few times. So the Maimer Friday night is Basi Legani, the Rebbe said after Kabbalah Shabbos. That's a little bit shorter. The second Maimer, which the Rebbe said Motzei Shabbos, to a larger audience, that Maimer is a little bit longer. There's a little bit more explanation. So we're going to learn that Maimer. So we're going to learn the second Maimer. When the Rebbe said the Maimer, before he said it, he said that we already said the Maimer yesterday, last night, Friday night. But we're going to say it again since there are more people here. And there'll probably also be some differences because, there's always, every time you say something, there's always something new. Just to point out something, just a note, is that the Rebbe would sometimes send, and this was common, I don't know about all the years of Basi Legani, but it wasn't only Basi Legani, some other Mamarim as well. The Rebbe would write a source sheet, basically, for the Maimer. So especially like a Maimer like Basi Legani, where the Rebbe was quoting from all the Rabbeim. So the Rebbe would write a little page with references. So where he was quoting from the Alter Rebbe, where you can find the quote from the Alter Rebbe, where you can find the quote from the Mittel Rebbe, etc., and some other sources in the writings of Kabbalah. So sometimes the Rebbe would write just references, see, Torah, wherever, look at Torah, the Torah, and sometimes they would actually write like a little, not a summary, but notes sort of on the topic that he was going to explore with some references. So in this Maimer, you'll notice we have footnotes that are numbered, but there's also notes with Aleph Beis, and those notes with the Aleph Beis, the alphabetical ones, are what the Rebbe wrote. You'll see printed in the beginning of this booklet. We're studying out of this booklet, the Basi Legani, that they published for this year. So you'll see on page Yud Gimel. So you see the notes that the Rebbe had written, references and sources for the. So you see how the Rebbe writes Admor Zaken. What's the quote? Where is he quoting from the Alter Rebbe? Admor Emtsoy. Where is he quoting from the? And you see how he lists all of them: Baal Shem Tov, Rav Magid, Tzemach Tzedek, Maharash, Adna, Rebbe Nishma Seidin. So you see how he quotes. He cites which Rebbe and where you can find that quote. Okay, now let's get into the Maimer. So this Maimer is Motzei Shabbos Kodesh Parsha B'Shalach Yud Shvat Maimer Beis Tafshin Ches. This is the Maimer from Saturday night. Motzei Shabbos B'Shalach Yud Shvat. It's the second Maimer because, as we mentioned, the Rebbe said the Maimer the first time on Friday night. Okay. And again, as we mentioned, this Maimer is going to focus primarily on chapter 8 of the series of the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer, which is toward the middle of the second Maimer of the series of Hayeshavas Begadim. Okay. So Basi Legani Achesi Kala, the Pasuk says, I've come to my garden, my sister, my bride. V'isa b'medrash, so the Medrash notes that Legan ein ksivkan ela Legani. That it doesn't say Basi Legan, I came to the garden, but it says I came to my garden. Ela Legani, my garden. My garden meaning Lignuni, to my palace. When you say my garden, I came to my garden, what does it mean that it's mine? It means I've been there before. It's mine. It's not something I'm coming to for the first time. I'm coming to my garden, which is L'makim Shay Ikri B'tchila. The Iker Shchina B'tachteinim Haisa. That's for the Medrash. That the Iker Shchina, which the Rebbe discusses, what does Iker Shchina mean? The Rebbe discusses that in the first Basi Legani. Some other places, the Iker Shchina, meaning the highest level of Shchina, the highest level of godliness that's referred to as Shchina, that was in the garden before. The garden, we're talking about our world. That the Eibusha comes down to this world. Basi Legani Achesi Kala. It's the day of Matan Torah. The Eibusha comes down into our, either by Matan Torah or by when the Mishkan was built, whatever it's a reference to, that he comes down into this world. Why is this world called his garden? Because he had already been there. When was he there? When he created the world. When he created the world. So what happened? What does it mean that he's coming now? He was here. Where did he go? So what happened was, first the Eibishter was down here, creates the world, and the Iker Shechina is down here, betachtonim, in our world. But then there were sins, starting with the first sin, the sin of the tree of knowledge, that when there's the sin of the tree of knowledge, so the Shechina retreated, so to speak, from earth, from this world, from the physical world to the first heaven. Obviously, we don't mean, God forbid, that the Eibishter disappears, is no longer in the world. What it means that he leaves this world means that the world is no longer sensitive to him, to his presence. Obviously, God that transcends time and space. But so it means that he's no longer apparent in this world. He retreated to the first heaven, and through the subsequent sins of the next generations, the Shechina continued to retreat from heaven to higher heaven until the seventh heaven. The Medrash lists the different sins that banished the Shechina higher and higher. Then the tzaddikim, the righteous, through their righteous service, then brought the Shechina back from the seventh heaven to the sixth, and then even lower, ad Moshe Rabbeinu, until Moshe. Shehu Hashvi, he was the seventh from the first. The first was Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was the first to draw the Shechina. He brings the Shechina down through his service of Hashem. He brings the Shechina closer, making the world more sensitive to godliness. So he brings the Shechina from the seventh heaven to the sixth, and then Yitzchak, Yaakov, the subsequent generations until Moshe, who is the seventh, and all seventh are beloved. The Chol Shvin Chavim is not from this medrash. This is all we're quoting basically from the Medrash on Basi Legani. Kol Shvin Chavim is a different Medrash, but it's included here. The Rebbe would always include it. Interestingly, the Friedrich Rebbe mentions Kol Shvin Chavim and talks about this topic at the Rebbe's Chasana. When the Rebbe got married, the Friedrich Rebbe spoke about the Maila of the seventh and Kol Shvin Chavivin and bringing the Shechina Lamata Ba'aretz. So already at the Rebbe's marriage, this whole thing is already sort of set in motion. But Kol Shvin Chavivin, they're all beloved. That Moshe was the one who brought the Shechina from the first heaven back down to this world. This is the meaning of the verse where Hashem instructs, make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell in them. What does it mean that the Eibusher will dwell in them? Meaning that the Ikar Shechina, he wants to be in this world. As it was when he came to his garden, to his palace, to this, he wants this world to be that space. So that was, we're talking about in the beginning. Eibusher was down here in this world in the beginning, and then the first 7 generations after creation, the Shekhinah retreats. Then the next 7 generations bring it back down to this world. Now we know we live in Galus, we live in exile, but we still are charged with this mission to bring the Shekhinah. What's the ultimate purpose and the goal of all of creation and of life is to bring the Shekhinah down here in this world. And that's the mission of the tzaddikim. We're all tzaddikim. Amich kulam tzaddikim. That the avodah of tzaddikim is shehei mashkinim umamshichim. That it says tzaddikim yisharetz v'yishkinu la'ad aleha. So v'yishkinu la'ad aleha, what does it mean v'yishkinu la'ad aleha? That they seemingly means tzaddikim, they inherit eretz olam haba, the world to come, and they v'yishkinu la'ad aleha, they rest there, they lay there forever. So the Rebbe explains v'yishkinu, what does it mean that tzaddikim, what is their purpose is yishkinu la'ad, their sheikhein ad. They bring this level of ad, which is not explained in the Maimer, but the level of ad, the Rebbe talks about it, the keser, whatever, the high level of godliness that's referred to as ad, that they're mashkin it, they cause it to dwell. Sheikhin, as in the term shechina, that it should be present in this world, Allah on this world. So that tzaddikim through their avodah mashkinim mamshichim, they draw down this bechinas sheikhin admarim v'kadosh, this level of sheikhin admarim v'kadosh, the high level that's removed from everything sheyeh begil lamata should be revealed here. How do they do this? Well, it's through their work of breaking the other side, breaking unholiness. Through istalik, it says it says in Kabbalah that that when we break the other side, so then there's a revelation of godliness in all worlds. The glory of God is istalik. Again, the term istalik is from the term istalkos. We say istalkos, istalik means that he passes, he goes away. But as we see here, the term istalik means not that he goes away, but is revealed. That it's it brings a revelation of godliness in all worlds. And what does this mean, a revelation of godliness in all worlds? What level of godliness is revealed in all worlds? So the Rebbe explains, when we say that it's revealed in all worlds, what does that mean? We're referring to a level of godliness that's equal to all worlds. And this is obviously not referring to the imminent light of God, in which no 2 worlds are alike. When we say that when we say that through breaking the unholiness, the glory of God, the revelation of godliness is revealed in all worlds. When we say it's revealed in all worlds, the implication is that it's revealed in all worlds equally. What light could be revealed in all worlds? You have lower worlds, higher worlds. There are worlds that are closer to God, worlds that are less sensitive to God. How could there be a light that's equal in all worlds? How could you compare our world to Atzilus? That's a world where there's only oneness of godliness, and this is a world that seems to challenge godliness. How could there be an equal revelation of godliness in both worlds? Because we're talking about a level of godliness that transcends all of it. In which case, all of this is equal. It's all the same. So that's the level that we're talking about bringing down. Again, so that's the idea of Iker Shechina, the highest level of godliness, the one that was there in the beginning of creation. That's the one that has to be down here in this world. So we're not talking about just adding a little bit of godly light in this world, adding a light that's a lower level of godliness from the level of the Malaklam. We're talking about the highest level that's revealed in this lowest world. And this is done, this revelation comes about through making a sanctuary for the Eibishter in this world. The Frierdiker Rebbe continues after explaining this idea of revealing godliness in the world. Frierdiker Rebbe turns his attention, we're talking about making a sanctuary for Hashem. What went on in the actual sanctuary, the historical Beis HaMikdash in the temple? What was the one of the services in the temple? And the Rebbe notes when we say one of, we don't just mean one of, but one means like a central, a special service in the temple. That was Avodas Karbanis, the Karbanis, the sacrifices. Ki Raza the Kurbana, Eilad Raza de Einseif. It says in Zohar that the mystery of the Karban, the mystery of sacrifices, goes up, is connected to the mystery of Einseif, to the very high level where we call it a mystery. What is karbanis? The word karban means to come close, to bring close. So karbanis, we're talking about the actual sacrifices. But when we say karbanis, coming closer to God, that's the inyan ha'Allah. This is the idea of rising, coming closer to God. What happens as a result of coming close to God? That causes a nachas ruach. So it says about karbanos, about the sacrifices, that it's reach nichoyach. God says it's a pleasant odor, a pleasing odor to God. It's nachas. So Hashem has nachas from the karbanos. What does that mean? So we bring a carbon, meaning we attempt to come close to God. That's the meaning of the word carbon, to come karov, to come close to God. That's the idea of sacrifice. We come closer to God. That's us going up. And what happens as a result of us coming closer to God? That brings to a reich nichoyach, brings to nachas. The Eibishter comes down. So it comes down. That's what you have. The Raza, the Korban, Oilad, the Raza, and then it draws it down here into this world. So the drawing of down here. The Eibishter dwells here in this world. In each and every one of us. So in other words, the whole idea of in this world. How was that done? The central service was bringing karbanis. When we bring karbanis, meaning we rise up towards God, that then draws God down here. That's the idea of Reich Nechayach. He comes down and dwells in this world. As is explained, the Frierdiker Rebbe explains in his Maimer, just as you had this idea of sacrifices in the physical Beis Hamikdash, you had physical sacrifices in the physical Beis Hamikdash. The same is true with regard to now, post-temple times, where we don't bring actual physical animal sacrifices, but we still have this idea of karbanis. What does it mean to bring a carbon? To give of yourself to God. Right, like in the introduction to the concept of sacrifices in the Torah, it says Adam ki yakriv mikem. So Chassidus explains what does it mean Adam ki yakriv mikem. A person, you have to give of yourself. The idea of a carbon is that you're giving of yourself to God. That still applies. Whether if you're giving your sacrifice, that's of your own property, your own money, which is giving of yourself. But here we mean literally of yourself. To give of yourself, to come closer to God, to be more sensitive to God. He works on himself and he accomplishes this idea of karbanis, of coming closer to God, within himself, meaning more sensitive, closer to God. So so this idea of karbanis still is applicable today. In this way. Then continues to explain. So the Frierdiker Rebbe first talks about the idea of bringing the Shechina down into this world through Skafi Sitrachra. Then he explains where did this happen? It happened in the Beis HaMikdash. Through Avodas Karbanis, he focuses on Karbanis and the idea of us refining ourselves, which is the idea of Karbanis, to come closer to God and then through that draw God down. Then the Frierdiker Rebbe continues and explains that this idea of drawing God into this world is not only through the service in the Beis HaMikdash, but it's expressed in the Beis HaMikdash itself. Specifically in the Mishkan, that was of Atzei Shittim. So we see that also different stages, in a sense, of the revelation of godliness in this world, where he brings it, first talks about in our service, bring it into ourselves, then also into the inanimate, into the world, the Mishkan itself, that the wood, we're going to explain soon, just the beams of the Mishkan, the very walls of it are a home for God. And as we're going to get to when we get to our chapter, it continues. It says that even the building blocks of creation itself, the very letters of the Hebrew alphabet through which God speaks to all of existence, even there we bring it down into the essence of the physical world. Right? He's going in stages here. So he says that is the idea of karbanis. Then he continues to explain that this is why the Mishkan was made ma'atzei shittim dafke from atzei shittim is type of wood, acacia wood, how it's translated. But the word for this type of wood in Hebrew, shittim hu malashon stia min haderech. The word shittim has the same root as the word shata, or like he says kisiste ishtay. When he talk about the Torah talks about a suspected adulteress, it says kisiste ishtay. His wife would stray. So the idea of shita. Sista is stia, is straying from the regular path. What does it mean when we say that the suspected adulteress is a reference to all of us? We're all God's wife, and so the Jews we're referred to as Hashem's wife. And when we stray or are suspected of straying, that's the idea of straying from the path. Hashem sets a path for us, how we're supposed to live our lives, and we stray from that path. That's the idea of shdus. So not only straying means the word shita means to stray, but it also comes from the word shtus, which means foolishness. Because a person is not capable of sinning unless he's overcome by a temporary insanity, by foolishness. So, and what's the proof the Gemara gives from the pasuk kesiste ishtay? That the word shtus seems to have a better connection with shita than so it's the same. It means the same thing. It's the same thing. Straying and foolishness is the same thing. So that's the idea of this is the idea of shtus, the foolishness of l'umazah. That when a person strays, he's acting foolish. And what's the antidote to that? Right. What's the antidote to that? So what is the response of the foolishness, the negative of the unholy, where we stray from the path of Hashem, is to then break the unholiness and then transform it and transform darkness, which is shemishtus de u'mazeh, from the foolishness of the other side of unholiness. We come to a foolishness of holiness. Like the Gemara talks about the foolishness of the sage, which was good from Shalideza, he becomes that through the Atzei Shittim we build the Mishkan, which is in which the divine presence rests. What are we talking about here? So the Gemara says that there was a certain sage, I think of Rababa, who was when it came to a wedding, so he would juggle a bunch of hadassim. And his fellow sages were not pleased with him because they felt that he wasn't that he's acting disrespectful for somebody of his stature, and in a sense he's mocking the office that he holds, the status that he holds. So they were not pleased with him, and he continued undeterred. When he passed away, so it says that there was mafsik le'nura amuda de nur. There was like a wall of fire that separated between him and everybody else. So they realized this is a very special person. The sages then said, what was it that was so special about him? Was this that it was this foolishness, his behavior that seemed to be in a foolish way, that they were disappointed with initially, that was actually good. So in other words, you have foolishness that's negative, a foolishness that's unholy, which is anytime you sin, anytime you stray from the path of Torah and mitzvahs, that's foolish. That's a ruach shtus, a foolishness, an unholy foolishness. But then there's a positive foolishness. There's a behaving in a holy manner, but in a way that's beyond reason. That foolishness, that transforms the other unholiness into... So that's the meaning then of atzei shittim, that the Mishkan was made of atzei shittim. It doesn't just mean acacia. What it means, they took shittim, they took the shtus, the foolishness of the physical world, and turned it into the walls of the temple. They turned it into the home in which God's revealed. So that's transforming the foolishness of unholiness into foolishness of holiness. That becomes the home in which God dwells and God is revealed.